Hey everyone, this is Ellie Mae with Silhouette Secrets Plus, and today I'm here with a video on mastering text using glyphs, and in this we will be creating a design that could be used for a cake topper. Now this was originally planned as a live, and I made it through about 45 minutes of that live, and then YouTube streaming had issues and it gave me an error. So I am recording this. However, this is going to be a one shot. I'm not going to do a whole lot of video editing, and it's not going to be movie magic. So if you are looking for step by step, that is what this video is intended for. I'm going to show you step by step on using text to create a design. Here's a look at the finished design that I did cut of my test file. And in this, we will be going over text, how to use text, how to change text, how to edit the text, also with the welding and auto weld. That was brought up in the live video as well. So if I do reference the video or in the live, that is why, if you are watching this in the future. If you are looking for a quick short video, that's probably not this video. If you're looking for step-by-step, then grab your cup of your favorite beverage and let's go ahead and get started. We will also be discussing offsets, both external and internal. So I want to make sure that you know all of the things. There's probably going to be a few more along the way that will be thrown in there, and we will be creating our own design. So let's go ahead and get started in the Silhouette Studio software. Again, this is going to be as unedited as possible. So in the Silhouette Studio software, we're going to start with creating our text design. And in this case, I'm going to be creating a design that could be used for a cake topper. However, this project can be actually used for anything: stickers, heat transfer vinyl, cards. We had a lot of ideas thrown out when we were in the chat in the live. So think about what you could use this for in your future projects. I'm going to start on the left-hand side with the text tool. Click on the letter A on the left, and I'm just simply going to click on my design mat and then start typing. So I'm going to type out happy. And my original plan was actually to simply do happy 12th. And then as I was doing the live, I realized that I added birthday in there and it didn't quite work for the cake topper. It didn't make sense, but it did bring up several good points. So I'm going to show you both in this video. Now, I just simply grabbed the corner bounding box and enlarged this so we could see it easier. And then I'm going to come up to the fill color in the top left in the quick access toolbar, and I'm simply going to change that to black just so it's easier to see on the screen. And then the next thing I'm going to do is you could also use your fill color palette on the right hand side as well. There's a little artist palette and you could select black as well, whichever one you are more comfortable with. Since it is editable text, that is the properties you see in the top quick access toolbar. You see your text style tool, you see your font size, your designations for bold, italic, all of that. So I'm going to add in birthday and 12 and th. I don't know why I said that sound. First, I'm going to Control-C, Control-V, and I'm simply going to copy and paste. When I do this, it's going to copy all of the properties that I have on my previous text. So this can be a quicker way to work with text and to alter it. I'm going to double click in here, and that brings it back to editing. And I can highlight in here and simply just type in birthday. Now I'm going to do that. Let's move these off here. And I'm going to do that one more time, two more times actually. Control-C, Control-V. This one I'm going to highlight and change to a 12. And then I'm going to Control-C, Control-V, and I'm going to change this one to a TH. We're going to work with two different designs here. Now this is the default text. I'm simply going to left click and drag across all of these to rubber band select everything. And then on the right hand side, I'm going to come over to my text style panel. Now, if you know the font that you want to go to, as I do, I will link all the supplies that I used for this in the description of this video below, as well as additional resources. If you know the font name, you can come up here to the top bar and simply highlight that and then just change it. So I am going to just start typing Amisteri because that's what I know my font is. And if it does not type, if it defaults back to the first font style, that means that your fonts have not completely loaded in the software yet. When you first open the text style panel is when those fonts load into the software. The more fonts you have on your computer, the longer that can take. And every computer is going to vary just a little bit in how it processes that data. So here, we're going to come down here and I'm going to use a font that's called Amisteri Script. And then I can kind of adjust this. For now, I'm going to move the 12th over, and then I can kind of move my birthday, happy and birthday. Now, I just happened on this font when I was creating a video for a question in my group, and I thought it was a very good example. And we will go through several different techniques here using this font style. So if you are creating something like a cake topper or a project where you want your design to be cut all as one piece, so it is scripty, it's like cursive, you just want everything to cut as one piece. You don't want to have individual letters that you have to glue on. So in this case, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a copy of my original, and I'm going to move it over here so I always have the copy of the original. And then I'm going to start working with this. So if you want it to be all connected, you have to connect those lines somehow. And it really just depends on the actual font you are using to determine what is going to look good. In this case, if I moved it over here, you want to watch where your lines are. So it looks fairly natural when you overlap and you weld something. Now, before you actually weld it on the screen, I'm going to talk about a couple different things with weld here. Before you weld it, you do want to make a copy. Once you weld something in software, it is permanent because it takes it out of editable text mode and it makes it a vector design. So you want to make sure before you do that, and if you close and open the file, it's permanent. So I always make a copy and have it off to the left-hand side. So you want this to overlap, but you want it to look natural. So in this case, if I move this over here, the B is overlapping, but this barely touches here, and this doesn't even touch here. So you could make it touch if you wanted to, or you can see if there's a different design, a different area where you can make it look a little bit more natural. So in this case, I can move this. And in the original video, I think I increased the size of this just a little bit. That can help too. And whatever font style you have, it's gonna vary. So the two things I want to point out here. Personally, I always weld my designs myself. I make a copy and I weld because we did not always have the cut edge that text now defaults to in the software. So I'm in the habit of welding. Now I'll show you the pros and cons to that. So if you weld it yourself in the software, again, that's permanent. So that is to some a negative. But in some cases, it can be better for your design. So if I make a copy of this, I'm going to show you the difference here. I want to say it starts in version 4.3. I did not go back and research the exact version number and look through all the data, but I want to say it started in 4.3, that all text automatically defaults to cut edge, which technically means that you do not have to weld a font. So I'm going to come up here to the Send tab in the top right corner. And in this case, if I zoom in here on this bottom one, even though my text is not welded, it is still designated with my text selected. It's designated as cut edge. That means that it will cut the outer edge of anything that is overlapping. What you want to note here, what I want to note here for you to watch, is that your H and your B are not overlapping. So they will still cut as a single letter design. Now, if I come up to this top here and select the top design and choose cut, this is how it originally was in the Silhouette Studio software. So any of those red lines that are in another letter overlap, that will be a cut. So all of those red lines would cut. So this is not going to work very well. It's not going to look good. It will cut, but it will cut out all these little tiny pieces, and it's not going to be a smooth cut. So I'm just going to change this back to cut edge. Now, I'm going to show you back on the design tab. You can send this to cut with the cut edge, and it will cut everything that's overlapping as one. However, let's just get rid of this one for a second. We'll move these over here out of the way. We still have this H and this B. In this case, if you are trying to make a design that is all one piece, it's all going to cut as one, you want to weld yourself. So here, if I come over here and I right click on it, once you change text in any way, ungroup, weld, release compound path, which you really shouldn't need to do unless you're actually editing the actual letters, convert to path. If you change text in any way, it is no longer editable text. It is a vector design. So keep that in mind. That's why I make a copy. I'm going to left click and drag across everything to select it. And then this here, the T is overlapping on the P, and the swoosh on the T is overlapping. So those sections are going to weld. If I right click and I choose weld, now that entire design, everything that's overlapping is welded together. But the H and the B are not, because they are not touching anything. They're not overlapping anything. So you can see that they have individual selection boxes around those. So if you automatically just use cut edge, they're going to cut separate. If you want them to overlap, then I just come in here. This is going to be your font style dependent. You're going to have to play around with it. And I just moved this down a little bit so it overlaps on the A. And then this one I was able to overlap, and it actually turned out really neat how this loop and both of these loops came together. So it's overlapping here, and then it's overlapping on the I. So if I left click and drag across everything, and then right click and choose weld again, now I have a design that's going to cut all as one. If I come over here to the send tab, we can zoom in on that, and you can see all of those letters are now overlapping. They're not going to cut through each other. So it really is dependent on your font style that you have chosen and on what your finished design or project is, on what you would want to do. For some things, cut edge, that it's not auto weld, because that's a separate feature I'm going to show you here in a second. Cut edge, it's not cut edge, and cut edge doesn't work well for all things. This is one of those examples, as well as sketch fonts. If you're working with a sketch font, cut edge is horrible. You will want to select your sketch font and choose cut for it to work properly. Now, there's two things I want to point out here. I want to figure out which way is the easiest way to do this. Let's come back here to the design tab. So here's our finished design. This is for happy birthday. This is, I'm just going to move it over here. We can come back and work with that in a second. I'm going to make a copy of my original. And then I want to show a feature that wasn't actually originally in my notes to share, but it brought up a good point, because I think that cut edge on fonts is often called auto weld, but there's actually a feature in the Silhouette Studio software that is auto weld. And I didn't know this until a couple years ago, because it's not on the simple tab. When I started working a lot with the Curio 2, which has actually been about Curio 1, 5 or 6 years now or more, I started working more with the line, cut by line, or action by line, I guess is a more definite, designation of that, and action by fill. So in this case, if you're on the line style, it's usually called cut by line. If you're on the line style, I only have one color designated as my line color. But what I want to point out here is that when you are on the line style or the fill in the send tab, you are going to notice that all these letters cut out of each other, because you did not weld it before. So this is unedited text. This is still in text edit mode if you want to go back to it. But if you're on the line or fill color on the send tab, it's going to cut through each other. There's a little box here with a little icon, and weld is at the top. If you can even see that, it's really tiny. If you click on that, that is your auto weld. You're going to see that rectangle and that circle weld together. The icon actually changes. Now, what you also will notice is that you have bold, red, fuzzy lines. That is a designation of cut edge. It does not mean your design is going to cut any differently. It's only a visual on the screen. So if you ever see the bold, red, fuzzy lines, in this case with text, it just simply means that cut edge is that's what the software is designating. So it's going to cut the same exact as just a simple red line. It's just how the software shows it. And we can zoom in here and see that just a little bit more. It's simply going to now weld. We still have those lines. I don't know if you can even see it on the screen, but we still have the lines that technically cut through, but since it's designated as auto weld, it's going to cut around the outer edge of your design. So that's one thing. It's also under the fill option here. So when I clicked on fill, I only have one fill color. The black lines are here, and it shows it's going to cut through. If I click on this little icon here, then it will auto weld. So it's not something I am in the habit of using, but it was something that I wanted to mention during the live, so I'm going to include it in the video, obviously, since I just did. So I'm going to come back here to this simple and then click on design. And then what we're going to do is the next step is I was asked a question about editing. So when you are working with designs like this, the question was, how can you edit the thin scripty areas of a text, or can you edit those? And the answer is yes. In this case, I'm going to move this over here to the right so I can work with it in a minute. In this case, let's move our finished, this is our finished design. I'm going to move it onto my design mat. I'm actually going to make a copy. I'm all about the copies. Having copies is it saves you frustration in the end. And then I'm going to scale this down. So some of these, the way the text is, the way the designs are, they don't always cut well smaller. You can notice in this font, it is a great example for that question that was asked. With this font, it has broad strokes and it has skinnier strokes. When you scale that down, these smaller areas, excuse me, these smaller areas may not cut as well, or they may be super thin. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to show you quickly edit points. Edit points are something that is very, very good to get used to, but it is very intimidating when somebody clicks on them to activate them If you double click, it activates those edit points. Now you will only get edit points on a vector design. And in some cases, if you have like an SVG file and it's all grouped together, you have to ungroup that before you can actually get the edit points to come up on a design. So if it's editable text, you're not going to see these edit points because it hasn't reached that point yet. So in this case, your edit points are your data points for the machine to literally connect the dots to cut the file or to cut the design you have on your screen. So it is connecting the dots. So as an example, if I move this edit point, this one right here, I just clicked on it to activate it, I can adjust my design. Those edit points are the data points that make up the design. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that. Now we have these small thin lines in here and we want to edit those. So there's two things I'm going to show you here, and I'm going to combine them since they were asked in the live. If I double click on this to activate them, I'm going to make this line here broader, bolder, not as skinny. And then the question was asked, can I do it to both sides, both letters at the same time? The answer is yes, so I'm going to show that to you, but you could do it individually, which is what I showed originally in the video. I'm going to zoom in here so we're working closer with the design. So these are where the two P's connect. These are pretty thin lines. So I want to work with edit points, but I want to select multiple edit points at the same time. There are two ways to do that. First, when you're in point editing mode, you want to hold down your Shift key, and then I can left click and I can drag across any edit points that I want to select. Or I'm going to come over here to this side. I'm going to select the same edit points that I want to change on both designs. And then with my Shift key held down, if I click on that, oh, it didn't do it. Hold on a second. Hold my Shift key down, left click, drag across. That's how I select it on the right side. I'm going to click on this point here. Oh, and of course now it's not working. Okay, I'm going to start over here on the left. Hold my Shift key down and click on each of these points. That's going to activate those points. And maybe, yeah, okay, so you can't do both the selections at the same time. That's okay. We learn as we go. Hold my Shift key down, click on each of these edit points that I want to select and change. And I think there's another one in there. So I have all of those selected. Now I can let go of my Shift key, but I tend to kind of hold that so it will keep all that selection. But let's see, you don't want to grab the blue handles. You want to grab the edit points, just left click and move that up or whatever direction you want to go. You want to be on the actual edit point, which is the white that is selected, which will be hard to see on the screen here. You don't want to select the blue. Now the blue handles are your control points for a specific edit point. So then you can adjust those if needed. See, I'll make this very exaggerated. You can adjust those as needed, and that changes how your line is. Now here, the red is what side of the edit point is activated to change. So for instance, I have multiple selected, so it's going to be red on both sides here and also over here. So that's a little bit about edit points, and I'll put more in the video description as well. So this gives us a little bit bolder line. Now the other thing you want to do is you want to keep your design fluid. So in this case, I would also come in and I would click on the edit points inside here. I'm going to hold my Shift key down again. And then I'll do the same thing over here so they all, since we're working with the same letter style. And what I can do is left click on the edit point and then start to drag. And you'll notice that I didn't get all of the edit points selected there. So I can kind of move this. What I want to do is move it up. I could either start over and select all those edit points, or I can move the majority of them. And then I can come in here, double click on it if those edit points disappear, And simply, in this case, maybe I just delete that. I hit delete on my keyboard. Do I really need that edit point? So now we have a little bit more here. And I would probably go through a little bit more refining in that. But if you have a font style that you really, really like, it may be worth the time to edit it, especially if you think you might use a design more than once. Then it might be really good to edit it and then save that file the way you like it. So we covered a lot of tips for working with thin fonts. Now in this case, what I forgot to mention is that the first thing that if you have a font style that is all the same line width and it doesn't have the variance like this one does, then using the offset could be a way to thicken that font. In this case, it won't work because we have such a difference in the brush strokes on this font. We have thicker and we have thinner. So your thicker are going to get even thicker if you used offset enough to get the thinner portions to cut. So in this case, I would come in here and I would do the edit points. This right here is not how I would leave it, but I'm not going to, spend the time on the camera to show you exactly how I would do that. You want to keep in mind that edit points do not change numbers. Like if we scale this down, that does not decrease the number of edit points. It simply squishes them together. So you have the same number of edit points in a smaller space, which can be problematic when you are cutting thin scripty designs. I will add more information in the resources linked in the video description below on that, because there's quite a bit you can get into with this, and it really just depends on your design. So let's zoom back out here. Now this is about where the live kind of streaming had a problem. So all of this content will be what I was planning to share and I never got to. So I am going to, let's just move this off. I'm going to save my file, which may take a couple seconds here. You can see I have my demo version from last night saved in there. I also will, part of my workflow that I shared last night, typically when I'm working with a file, everything that's unedited or the copies are on the left-hand side. And if I'm actually cutting the file, everything that I have cut, I move over to the right-hand side. Now I've just moved this out of the way because I didn't want it to get distracted with it. My original design said happy 12th. And I need to adjust these a little bit to make it work, right. I can make this overlap, and then the TH can be a little bit smaller. And I have some wiggle room here. I was told by a friend who was a party planner that typically she would keep her cake toppers about 7 inches, 7.5 inches. That if you go too much larger than that, it can not look quite right on your normal size cakes. So that was that's what I go off of because I learned it from a friend of mine who was a party planner. So I'm just going to move this up here. Now, when I showed my daughter the design while I was creating this, let's zoom in so you can see exactly how I have these overlapping. I'll delete that. When I showed my daughter this file, she loved the font. I'm going to move this up over just so it's overlapping just a little bit more because that T does not overlap, but it overlaps in here. So let me take the fill color out of this so you can see exactly what I mean. So my 1 is overlapping here. My 2 is overlapping here. I have the T swoosh that overlaps, and then I'm overlapping in 2 places here. So this is going to cut all as one, and it's going to flow. Let's put this color back in. And when I asked her what she thought of the design, she said it's good, but can you choose a different font style for the numbers. I don't really like that. And she's right. What you'll notice with numbers is that sometimes your numbers don't always match or work well with your font. And in some cases, some font files don't even have numbers. So there's two things I'll cover here with this. Glyphs. Glyphs are special characters in a font file. So I'm going to actually activate this here, double click on it, or just simply click on it. Come over to my text style panel on the right hand side. Now, glyphs are a designer edition feature or higher. So you do have to have the designer edition upgrade or higher in order to have glyphs. Glyphs are special characters that are added into a font style that are more than the average 26 characters that make up a font. When I first started, glyphs weren't even really very big or a thing at all. Now we have font files that are 300 characters, 900 characters, 1,300 characters. You could spend all day going through some of these fonts with glyphs. If you have the designer edition upgrade, glyphs is the second tab at the top here. And I have this text style selected, so it shows my Amisteri script. You do want it to say the font name here so that when you click on the G or the glyphs, it will automatically bring in those, it'll show you the glyphs for that font style. Now at the bottom of the panel here, you can increase it. I've already been working in the software, so mine is set to large. It will reset when I close the software, and it usually starts in the middle. But that's as large as you can go to make these glyphs show up. So you can see if I scroll down here, this font style has quite a few different glyphs. We're going to come down here all the way to the bottom. And each of these, it has multiple letter styles with the extra swirls and different things for your letters. So if you move your mouse over top of one, it does pop up a little icon that's a little larger. To use those glyphs, I'm going to double click into my font style, and I'm going to highlight my Y and simply select the one I want to change it to. Now that does change my design a little bit in the placement, so I'll have to rework that. And your glyphs are going to vary by font style. Your design may not look the same as my design. You may choose a different Y. You may choose a different loop. I did not choose the bottom loops because I didn't think it would work very well in this case, but it actually might if I moved the letters and the TH down. So you could play around with that. You can only add, when it's in editable text mode, this is when you can click on it and it will replace the letter. Or if I click on it again, it's going to add that letter. If you are not in the text and you want to select one, if you click on it, double click on it, it's going to add it to the top left of your design area, and it is not filled with color. So there are sometimes I will work with glyphs individually, especially when you're working with things like real time. That's an alarm for me, a reminder. Again, I'm not going to edit this video. This is just real life. So you can work with them individually if you want. In that case, in order, you would still have to select everything and weld it as your final step. Remember to make a copy before you do that. So I'm just going to come down here, and now that I've added this Y, I'll zoom in here. It's only going to overlap here on the 2 and on the T. And that'll be just fine for our design. It's still going to cut. So I have the basis for my design. But back to the fonts. Fonts can be funny, or numbers. Numbers can be funny. And in this case, I agree with her. I thought that it was a little bit too blocky. So what I ended up doing is first, we're going to create our offset for the entire design. I'm actually going to zoom out here and I'm going to Control C, Control V, and I'm going to make a copy. So I have this before I change anything. And then I always do weld at the very, very last step in case once I do the, let's see here. I actually have to alter this before I do the final offset. Just remember that. So first, back to the numbers. We're going to do an internal offset. She said it was too blocky. Could I choose a different font style? I tried that. None of them worked. We went through a few. They were ugly. So I decided I'm just going to make a copy of the 12. And then what I can do is I can come over here to the offset panel, which is your star, and I'm going to make an internal offset. And we can't really see anything happening. So what I'm going to do is undo, Control Z. I'm going to take the color out of this so you can see it easier on the screen. Then I'm going to select internal offset. And it doesn't look like it did anything, but that's because my distance is set too high for the internal offset. If I decrease that, now you can see that it shows up. So now I can make these letters or these numbers skinnier. And if I click apply, that's going to activate it. I'm going to click Control G, that will group it. So now what I ended up doing was I filled this with color, and we'll fill that background again with color. And when I did that, she said, well, I like that. I want that layered like that. That looks better than this big blocky 12. Okay, we can work with that. So if we zoom back in here, I have this is my original. I can go ahead and I can move this off, and you could stack it if you wanted to get it in the exact same place, but you don't have to. And then I'm going to move this up here and position it how I want with the 1 and the 2 overlapping and the TH. Once I have that, I can go ahead and I can move my 12 off so I'm not selecting it. So once it's placed on my design and how I want it to be, I can move the skinny letters off. These will cut as individual layers, and that is how I did it for my demonstration, my demo. I'll show a photo of that here in just a second. So now once I have all of my design, I'm going to left click and drag across everything. And then I am going to, since I changed something, I do need to make a copy. Control C, Control V, make a copy. See, you should see some of my design files. This is nothing, but it's the process. You can always save this file and start a new file with simple, with the last design you worked with. But if you have copies saved and something happens where a file gets corrupted or something along that line, you can always go back to a save point on where you had those copies. So there's times where I've changed a design multiple times, so I'll have copies of that original and the changes along the way. So I can always go back to the steps. If I delete it or I make it permanent by welding, I can't go back and change that. I would have to start over. Now, one thing I will point out here, this might have been the last thing I said on the live last night. The blue line is your spell check. If spell check is turned on, I'm going to click on the text style panel. The third tab at the top is spelling. And it doesn't have this in here. When you add a glyph to a word, it does not recognize that as an actual letter. So when I change this Y to the swirly Y, then it's saying that the spelling is wrong because it doesn't actually recognize that Y as a real letter. You can also see that under here as the TH. TH is not an actual like word, so it, gives me the blue line. I don't actually, it doesn't matter. It's just a visual on the screen. And in almost all versions, there's one version, I think, that it actually prints when you print through a printer. It doesn't really make a difference. You could add it to the dictionary, or you can choose to, under advanced options, you can uncheck auto spell check. You also have a few more things. There used to be a place where you could choose to ignore it. It will disappear in just a second because we are going to weld this and it will no longer be editable text. So I'm going to left click, drag across everything, and then I'm going to make sure it's all how I want it. As much as I can is overlapping. Take note that the H is not overlapping. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose weld. And then now I have two selection boxes. Everything that was overlapping is one. Here is the outer edge of that. And then my H is separate. So I can click off of it to deselect it. And now I can come in here and I can adjust my H where I would like it. And then I'm going to left click, drag across all of that, and right click and choose weld. Now I have my completed design. I can pull this up in here, not completed. We still have one more step, or two more steps actually. I have a trick for you. So now we have the inside guts of our design. With this, I'm going to left click and drag across everything. And the next step I'm going to do is I want to create a large offset for the background. But it may not look right when I do the full offset to get all the inside bits. So I'm going to show you a trick. However, I want to keep my pink 12 in its location. So I can see how this is going to look on the screen when I'm working with it. I left clicked around everything and drug that. And I'm going to hold my shift key down and click on that pink to deselect it. I do not want the offset to apply to that part, but I want to see how it looks on the screen all together. So I'm going to come over to the offset panel, and now I'm going to select offset. And what you're going to see is the last offset I used was the 0.060. That's what it brings on, and it's not enough. I want it to be bolder. So I'm going to increase the distance. And as I do that, you're going to see all these little inside bits are here. There's a couple ways you can work with this. If this is where you want to stop here, let me make a copy. I'll show you two ways. Now I'm probably going to have to, let's undo and make a copy first. Move this up, Control C, Control V. So we'll end up with a little bit different look on both of these. Left click, drag across everything, and hold my shift key down and click on the pink to deselect it. And then I will zoom in here. So on the top, I'm going to choose offset. That was the last number I worked with. So if I click apply, now I have all those little inner bits. If I don't want those inside bits, so let me make this a obnoxious color, yellow. If I don't want those inside bits, I can right click, release the compound path. Now it all fills with a solid color and all of those little bits are individual pieces. Hold my shift key down and click on the very outer edge. And now the only thing selected are the inside bits. I can go ahead and press delete and I have my background. Now the other thing you can do, let's move down here. I'm going to select the entire design and I might need a little bit more room here. Let's go ahead and move this just up. And then zoom in. I'm going to left click, drag across everything to select it, hold my shift key down and click on the 12. So it's deselected. So the offset is only going to apply to the outer edge. If I choose offset, that is the last one that I had selected. It still has those inner bits. If I want to try to decrease those inside bits and make it bigger, I can definitely do that until everything is gone. Now that is quite a large offset. I can go ahead and click apply. Let's fill this with yellow again so you can see it really easily. So, and that may work well for what you're going for. If you think that's too big, you want it to come back in a little bit, to refine that, then simply come over here to internal offset, and you can bring that back down. So I'm going to decrease that distance and maybe bring this back, click apply. Now I'm going to fill it with a different color so you can see this. So then you can bring in your offset just a little bit more. So both methods work, and each one, let's get out here a little bit. Each one would give you a little bit different look. And if you haven't been made aware, there are multiple ways to do things in the Silhouette Studio software, and sometimes they can yield different results and different looks. It can be what you want for one project might be the top one that you want. For another project, you might want the backs, the bottom one. If I just press delete here, you maybe want that, where you want the big, bold background. So it really just depends on what you want to work with, but you have the options in the Silhouette Studio software to work with these tools. Now, I have covered everything that was on my list and any questions that I had during the live. Please make sure to check out the additional resources that are linked in the video description, as well as I will put a link for this font. And here's a look at my finished cut example. I will also link the supplies I used for that with the holographic overlay. Make sure to do your test cuts. This is just a holographic overlay on top of cardstock. It cut very well, although I did get a little bit of the zipper effect around the edges with that holographic, just because it gets stuck kind of on the blade, but I still think it turned out really, really cool and gives it a unique look. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your feedback on if you learned some new things in this video. Thanks for watching and have a great day.